mainly going to focus on the organizational counseling. But before that, just for your knowledge and understanding, we are going to talk about or mention some of the approaches to counseling, because this is going on for ages. The first approach that comes here is the psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis is basically, in one word, is telling you that your present behavior is because of your past experience, starting from your birth process. And the techniques that are used in psychoanalysis are free association, dream analysis, transference, which is used in a very commonsensical way, but they are not so, they are very specific, and one has to look at the aims and aspects of the individual and then go for these kinds of techniques. The second approach, which is very important, is the behavioral approach, where the main belief is that the learning theories, how people learn, and by making you learn certain things, you can change your behavior. So we have here the father of behaviorism, Pavlov, who believed that if you control the external stimulus, you can control the behavior also. But this was negated by the later psychologists, who believed that it's the process that is more important, and social psychologists like Bandura, they looked at the social processes of the individual, which can change the behavior of the individual or thought processes of the individual. Mostly the behavioral approach gives emphasis on external stimulus. Then we come to humanistic approach. This is emphasizing the uniqueness of every individual. No two individuals are similar, and their learning potential is also not similar. So there is potential in every individual to develop and deal with one's own problems and issues. The another approach in this humanistic are person-centered therapies by Carl Rogers. You might have heard about it. Gestalt therapy by Fritz Perls, and existential approach. So the main belief is that in this existential or person-centered therapy is that they have this faith in individual. Every individual has a potential to learn, to change, and deal with one's own problem. So the role of the counselor is just to create a conducive environment for the individual for self-realization. Then there are cognitive approaches. Actually, in behavioral approach, we emphasize on the external behavior, whereas the cognitive approach deals mostly on the mental processes like thinking, cognition, and other processes. And here the main base is that we have to remove the irrational thoughts and cognitive dissonance from the individual. Then we have CBT, which is also an extension of cognitive approach, where the behavioral therapy is used to change the mindset, to change the thinking. The eclectic approach is a combination of all these approaches, not based on any specific. The whole understanding is that as and when you require, you use that approach. It can be psychoanalytic in combination with behavioral or cognitive or existential, like that. So this is an eclectic approach. Quite a few psychotherapists and counselors use this, But this has the problem is that here we don't know what kind of existential issues which are important, or do we have to just focus on the individual defenses. So, eclectic approach is a combination of all. There are many ethical issues in counseling, and that is very important for all to understand, because counseling builds a relationship and the rapport and trust has to be ethical, not serving anybody's purpose or self-interest. Then many people believe that it is an attack on the individual autonomy. Yes, in counseling, autonomy is sacrificed on both parts, the counselor as well as the counselee. They work in conjunction. Then here along with this is that people have this negative approach that the right to take a decision about one's own life is with the individual. Counselor has no job, no basis for manipulating. This is not true, because here the issue is that the counselor doesn't go with a malified intention. It has to be working for helping others. Then there is an issue of justice, confidentiality and privacy matters. This has to be worked out by the counselor. If it is not worked out, then of course this is becoming unethical. And very important, there has to be an informed consent in the counseling process. The person who is being counseled and the person who is giving the counseling, they should inform each other and given consent to be agreeing to the entire process. And there are legal issues which depends on the state and their regulations. Counseling in organizational setup, we have to understand this, because these days why? Due to this excessive stress, due to change, people are experiencing burnout. They are getting distanced from their jobs. They become nonchalant, they become insensitive. So, for example, the people doing the same job over and over again become careless. This is happening due to burnout, may lead to accidents. Another some important reason is the role overload. Too many expectations. Person doing all kinds of job and is expected to do it properly, all jobs. Then role ambiguity, where the organization fails to clarify the nature of the role. One is not claiming that every role has to have some definitive boundaries, but there has to be some limits. So ambiguities should not work. Who is going to do the job and how? This process has to be clarified from time to time. Then there is this issue of shift work, especially night work. It creates a change in the body cycle and disturbs the pattern of physiological existence. This needs to be worked out, this needs to be understood, and people should be helped by the counseling process to adjust to that kind, understand and adjust. Then strenuous work, we already know that these technological changes, the IT sector is putting tremendous strain on people. The expectations have gone up, but the conditions of work hasn't improved much. And in today's world, I can give you this example. Many people are saying that under COVID situation, the work from home is an extra stress for many, because the usual time was from 9 to 5, for example. If it is from 9 to 5, after 5 there is no work, before 9 there is no work. But now it is almost a 24 hours job. This is bringing a different kind of stress because of the environmental changes, the technological, the demands are changing, the kind of work relationships are changing. So, this is basically resulting into stress. We use this word very commonly. One becomes very anxious because there is stiff and unnecessary competition. People don't understand and jump into the job. It leads to depression. If you read the papers, you will know that this depression is now being found in children also, who are under a tremendous pressure of studies. And there are many other psychological problems and disorders which happen, and the organizations need to take into their cognition, recognize that these are the changes and make necessary interventions. And here the intervention is counseling, and counselor also must be acquainted with these kind of the forces of the change. The main issues, as we have already discussed, is productivity. There is a tremendous pressure for increasing productivity and distribution. The psychological disorders are becoming very prevalent because the well-being of the individuals are not taken care of. If you have ordered something online, even if it is 45 degrees, the person has to deliver the goods, the courier person. You don't think about that, the stress, the problems, the trouble that the person undergoes, but we demand it because the times are like that. So, this kind of issue has to be dealt with, and this is only done with, because we cannot change the physical conditions, we can at least make some kind of psychological understanding for the person to understand and give that space. Then there are conflicts. These are mainly happening to various reasons like differences, disputes among the employees, technological changes, and the lack of training. People are just thrown into the job, go and do it, without being properly trained, and the stress, the dishonesty, all these things become a part of their job also. So, this lack of training is creating mechanism by which they are not able to adjust. So, the counseling is required. Then absenteeism, substance abuse, we have already talked about, and other behavioral problems are cropping up day by day. Now, these are reflecting mostly on organizational changes, the restructuring of our life space, organizational space, and another technical thing is that what happens to the employees when mergers take place or some organizational take place. This kind of situation is requiring the counseling process be made an integral part of the organization. It has to be built into this system. One doesn't have to all the time run and call a counselor. The counselor must be a part of the organization, familiar with the organization, familiar with people, and have the empathy to understand the issues and conflicts that the people are facing. Then another counseling situation requirement is career transition. People get transferred, people are promoted, people are made to change the job if this kind of job and is not needed, so you go into another kind of job. But who prepares them for these roles and responsibilities? is just not the technical side, is just not programmed in a matrix format. You need the human touch. These people say, for example, some people are promoted. Many times after promotion they become ineffective. Why? Because they are not made familiar with the roles and responsibilities that have changed from their earlier job. Then what kind of career? Career counseling is very important, and that has to be made a part of the organizational setup, preparing people for next position or a job position falling vacant due to any reason, transfer, nature of industry changing, and especially when I gave you the example of these nature of purchase behavior has changed because of this, and even the financial behavior, net banking, your different apps that you have, your mobile, these things have changed. Have we made the employees change? This change, the behavioral change, has to be done for the employees by the counselor. It cannot be done by any Tom, Dick and Harry. It has to be a professional approach, because overall well-being of the organization is at stake. So, to prevent the onset of stress or any kind of problems that we had talked earlier, like substance abuse and dissociation with the setup, getting mental breakup, all these things, they need to be prevented, because if you want to retain and retain effectively in a positive manner the health of the employee and take care of their overall well-being, you need to have a counselor, not just a mentor or a coach. Then these are the issues we already have discussed. They are also applicable in organizational setup, the pressures and deference from the management. People think, the management especially, if they are not sensitive to human resources, nobody accepts it, but actually they are not. Many of them are not. They should not delay in taking the help from the counselor for their employees, for their good. Maintaining confidentiality, removing the social stigma that is attached to counseling, removing insecurities, lack of awareness and misconceptions about counseling is required to be removed. The employees must be made familiar with the kind of facilities in this kind of context, and there have to be a removal of misconceptions. For example, people think that if you go to a counselor, the counselor will read your mind. This is a misconception. Nobody is a mind reader. They are counselors. Most often we find that counseling is taken as a negative aspect of any organization and associated with the social stigma. If the organization makes counseling as a department, people will think that this organization has lots of problems, that's why they need a counseling department. This is not so. This is a misconception. This needs to be removed. Then another reason is that diversity in organization. Like the machines, you don't make the same format for the individuals. They come from diverse backgrounds, diverse societies, cultures. They are not put into a mold. Even if you take one group of employees at one time, it doesn't mean that you are taking the same kind of people. You have to understand. Here, the counselor plays a very important role, and managers should have the clarity about the kind of role and prioritize the goals of the organization in regarding counseling. So, if you want to put it in a word, counseling should be made an integral part of any functional and effective organization. Now, what are the recent trends that we find? Counseling takes a lot of time, and that is why the organizations do not want to spend that kind of time and energy and money on counseling. But you cannot deny the existence of the need for counseling. So, we have some e-counseling for employees. This is a technological change, this is a time saving device, and this can be confidential also. But one advantage that I find with the e-counseling is that the conversations can be saved for future, so that the same kind of situation doesn't arise, or if it arises, one has some clues how to deal with that. E-counseling is effective in a way that it may save time, and the employees have enough time to reflect on their problems, on their issues, and the resultant, indirect resultant will be self-awareness. People will become aware of their own self, their weaknesses, their potentials, their abilities, and the need for counseling will be reduced. Then group counseling is a time saver, but you need to have the need to select the people who are making the group. They should be similar. It helps in reducing the time, but it also promotes the sharing in that process. The confidentiality of one's own existence may be less. So, this is a danger of group counseling, but it saves a time, and if you can get people with similar background and potentials and showing similar kind of problems, then group counseling is of course recommended for use. Then the amount of stress. These days industries are experiencing a lot of stress and burnout. Now, some relaxation techniques which can be put in place by the professional counselor is very helpful. Some kind of meditation, we are talking about yoga just like that, but this is where you can use effectively the yoga and meditation practices with the help of a counselor. You need a counselor because it promotes the positive mental health and prevents psychological problems. Then one more important thing is that employee should not be seen only as a member of the organization. The employee is also a family person. If the problem is coming due to family, there should be a space for family members also to be involved in counseling process. So, this whole process, organization should facilitate in family counseling. A lot of government organizations are doing it, but how effectively we just have to see. But this is a very important aspect and needs to be taken up. And another important aspect of organizational counseling is diversity and multicultural counseling. The diversity, in a very simplistic way, people come from all walks of life, different religion, caste, region, gender, and age group. So, diversity has to be one. There is no It's not like a dress, one dress fitting all. It's not a uniform. So the diversity has to be kept in mind by both the organization as well as the counselor. And multicultural counseling, everybody is not made to suit one type of counseling. So counselor has to change as per the need, and the organization also must be alert to this fact. Then there is a process of behavior modification, which is more technical, where behavior modification, especially in the organizational context, is done through social learning, and the change is one of the indicators of behavior modification, but it's a very technical aspect. We are not going to deal with this here in detail. So the main thing in behavior modification works on law of effect. What kind of change leads to what kind of effect, what kind of positive reinforcement, and how you shape the behavior. It is negative and reinforcement and punishment is always discouraged. And one important thing in behavior modification you have to remember is extinction. You should be alert to the fact that the favorable behavior should not become extinct, especially of the employees. These are all details of behavior modification. We are not going into that, and thank you so much.